most of you have got full marks, or few have got 9 and all. So most of you have made a mistake in the question. Pick the odd one out. I put two questions like that. Pick the odd one out. One was all the others. When one question, all of them were external feeders except one. In other question, I think it was all of them were primary, and another one was secondary. That's all. Primary and secondary tests. Okay, so that's the one which most of some of you have made the mistakes. Okay, fine. We will continue with our classes today. Last week on Saturday, we have finished a bit about integrated mess management and storage. I think we have completed inert dust, isn't it? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Now we'll start with irradiation. Actually, as you all know, irradiation are classified into ionizing and non-ionizing radiations. Among the both ionizing as well as non-ionizing radiations are used in storage pest management. Among ionizing radiation, gamma rays are the one which are widely used in pest management. It is already an accepted management protocol for eradication of insect pests from storage. Nowadays, slowly, this method is again gaining, though it's an old technology. Nowadays, it's gaining much more importance, especially in quarantine facilities, because earlier we used to use a fumigant called as methyl bromide in quarantine procedures, because methyl bromide was cheap and effect was quick. If we fumigate it within 2 to 3 days, almost all the insects will get killed. So if we have some consignment from abroad, we will fumigate it with methyl bromide. Third day or fourth day, we can release it, and it was effective against all kind of insect pests. But the use of methyl bromide is restricted now because of its ozone depleting properties. Every year we have to bring about certain limit cuts in the use of methyl bromide. So now slowly this gamma radiation is gaining more and more importance. But the problem with gamma radiation is that it's an ionizing radiation. At the recommended dose, it does when usually the International Atomic Energy Agency, you might have heard about it, IAEA. IAEA. International Atomic Energy Agency. International Atomic Energy is the one which conducts a lot of trials with respect to this irradiation in grains, stored grains. They prescribe that even up to 10 kilogray, that is the unit. Gray is the unit GY, gray. Is the unit up to 10 kilogray. That means 10,000 grays. It doesn't cause any harm to the irradiated produce. So up to 10 kilogray, even if it irradiate any food commodity, it is safe for consumption. So that is they prescribe. So, but even up to 1 kilogram is sufficient to disinfect most of the food grains. Last year, one of my students worked on gamma radiation for irradiation, and he worked with Calosobruchus, and he found out that in Calosobruchus X, even a dose of 10 or 15 kilograms is sufficient. X. As the stages increases, for grubs we need a slightly higher dose, for pupae another higher dose, for adults again a higher dose is sufficient for. So we found out that about 150 or 200 grays is sufficient for causing mortality of the adults. There are certain studies which indicate that about 650 grays is sufficient. So whatever it may be, if you are working with Calosobruchus, a dose of about 1 kilogram is sufficient for complete mortality of the insect. The susceptibility of different species varies, but most of the insects 1 kilogram is sufficient. So the cobalt 60 is the most common radiation source which can penetrate 20 to 50 centimeter into solid foods. And another thing with respect to that, also we have studied in that PG program what effect irradiation brings on adults. So we irradiated adults with a sublethal dose, that dose which doesn't cause any mortality. We used about 20, 40, 50 grays like that. And all these doses induced sterility in the adults. Those adults were unable to produce offspring. So even if we use a lower dose, the insect may not get killed, but the insect become sterile. So that is one advantage of irradiation. But this irradiation cannot be used for seeds, only for grains, because as you know, the irradiation can induce mutations and may kill the seeds. Another group of radiation is non-ionizing radiation, and among which microwave radiation is gaining more and more importance. Slowly, slowly, the work with respect to microwave is gaining acceptability. One of my students is currently working on microwave radiation. We are working on, I don't have the data yet. We are trying to work it out. Again, internationally, microwaves are widely being used. Don't think about this small microwave oven which we are using in our home. It's not so. Commercially large microwave ovens are available, which works on conveyor kind of mechanism. That means the food will be kept at a particular kind of microwave radiation. Unlike gamma radiation, one problem with microwave radiation is that microwave radiation it can't penetrate extremely deep into the food grain. So depth should be standardized. So if we have standardized the depth at that particular level, grains will be fed through the microwave oven, a big kind of industrial kind of oven. So while it passes through that oven, through the conveyor, it will get irradiated by microwaves and it will get sterilized. So that's the industrial kind of microwaves which are designed by several scientists. In India, there is one study from IIT, I think from IIT Kharagpur, and in Canada, we have one study from Ontario, that is University of Ontario. I think Dr. Digvir Jayas has worked on it. So very few works they have done. What we are trying here at our level is we are trying to use our household microwave as a tool for disinfesting grains. So we are trying to standardize the dose, trying to standardize the thickness with which we can disinfest the grains. So those who have a microwave at their home, they can utilize that and disinfest their grains. Once you purchase a grain, keep it in microwave for a certain period of, instead of going for drying. Those who are living in flats and all, they may not have facility for sun drying and all. So they can use their microwave, dry it, irradiate it, store it. So once you irradiate it, whatever be the insects surviving in that lot which you have purchased can be disinfested. So that's what we are trying to do. Okay, this is with respect to irradiation. Coming to the next one, cultural methods. Cultural method. There are certain cultural methods which are extremely easy to understand. One thing is, I think I have asked you that question before. Which one is more susceptible, parboiled rice or raw rice for insect infestation? Parboiled rice or raw rice? Raw rice. If you see parboiled rice, usually I don't know about students from other states. In Kerala, we use parboiled rice. In parboiled rice, but the parboiling process makes the grain resistant to insect infestation. We don't usually get any insect infestation in parboiled rice, but in raw rice, heavy infestation, especially with Setophilus, etc. So that is one practice. Another practice is splitting of pulses. Splitting of pulses means you might have seen whole pulses and split pulses, dal. Green gram and green gram dal. നമ്മൾ മലയാളത്തിൽ ചെറുപയർ പരിപ്പും green gram and green gram dal. Have you ever seen pulse beetle damaging green gram dal or any pulse dal which is split pulse? asking about bruchids, you may see Cytophilus and all. Cytophilus usually infest split pulses, but pulse beetle, have you ever seen? No. Pulse beetle, it is prefers only whole grains. It doesn't damage split pulses. It doesn't prefer split pulses. Split pulses. So that is one way to prevent pulse beetle infestation, to convert whole pulses into dals. Then third one is resistant varieties. Resistant varieties is another strategy. We have I had an opportunity to work with a student. She was from Calicut University. She did a short project, a 2 month, 3 month project in our lab. And the work I have given was screening of different KU cowpea varieties for the resistance against pulse beetle. So she screened 8 or 9 varieties released by KU, and we found out that 3 or 4 varieties, the Callicebrucus failed to survive, failed to lay their eggs. Even if they laid eggs, the grapes didn't emerge. So that is the importance of resistance. Certain varieties are extremely resistant to stored grains. So those things usually we study a lot about resistance in field pests, but we don't work much about storage pests. But in storage also we have certain varieties which are resistant to insects. When coming to botanicals, if you study, if you scan literature with respect to storage pest management, you can see innumerable number of papers using botanicals for storage pest management. Though we have several reports of several plant material which is showing effectiveness against storage pests, starting from neem. If you remember though what you studied in your UG, you might have studied. If you remember that in old times in India, stored grains, they usually keep dried leaves of neem for protecting the grains. So neem was used from time immemorial for protecting storage pests in India. So several plant material have insecticidal properties, but their use is not that extensive, because every time one or the other thing, most of the time they mix it with food grains and test it for its insecticidal activity and all. But the problem is in India we are not permitting mixing of anything with grains. Only for seeds we can mix with any material. So botanicals we have to mix with the grains. Spraying, because of the low persistence of botanicals. Botanicals doesn't have that it doesn't persist long. So most of the time, because of the low persistence of botanicals, it doesn't have much effect on storage insects. So neem is one which are very high potential, is widely used still in household. We can still continue to use neem. Karanch, Pongamia, having very good insecticidal activity. But one thing which is emerging is essential oils. The oils which are extracted from certain plants such as lemongrass, citronella, you might have studied in your UG, essential oil yielding plants. Lemongrass, citronella, rosemary, thyme, etc. So many essential oil, even eucalyptus, pine, mint, etc. All these are that any tree is or plants which is having very good smell. You might have smelled mint, etc. So all this eucalyptus, all this oil have very good smell. These are essential oil yielding plants. The components in those oils, say eucalyptus oil, I think everyone of you might have seen eucalyptus oil. This eucalyptus oil contains number of volatile ingredients, chemicals. These volatile chemicals are insecticidal in nature. There are several chemicals such as thymol, menthol, camphor, carboxyl, linalool, cineol, citronella, carvon, pinene, limonene, etc. So these are the common chemicals which are found in these essential oils. These 1, 3 or 4 essential oil chemicals may be present in a single essential oil. This carvone, linalool, limonene, cineol, etc. are seen in most of the essential oils. So a single essential oil may contain several chemicals, and these chemicals can be present in several kinds of essential oils. So all these are having insecticidal properties, and these are having contact as well as fumigant action. So that is one attraction of it. If you spray it on a surface, it will have fumigant action just like DDVP, and it will also have contact. If insect comes into contact with that sprayed essential oil, it will also cause the mortality of the adult. So one of my PhD student is now working on essential oils. This essential oil based pesticides are now getting registered abroad. Several pesticides, at least 4 or 5 pesticides, are now getting registered. So this is one area of botanicals which is advancing fast for storage pest management as well as field pest management. So essential oils, you can have several reviews on essential oils. So that is one thing, essential oils. Another thing is edible oils. Edible oils, whatever the cooking oil which we use, coconut oil, mustard oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, whatever oil which we use for cooking now home. These oils can be used for protecting pulses from pulse beetle infestation. Just coat the seeds with pulses, whatever be the pulse, just coat the pulses with the oil which you are using in your home. It can be coconut oil or any other oil, mustard oil or any oil. If you are using it for seed purpose, you can coat it with neem oil. But for grain purpose, we can mix it. We can't mix it with neem oil because it will cause bitterness to the grain. So mix it with thoroughly coat the grains with any edible oil. And how can you have a guess how this edible oil protect the grain from pulse beetle infestation? Yes, it prevents egg laying. There was a question in the quiz that what is scale like eggs are seen on the pulses. That is because of pulse beetle infestation. These scale like eggs are sticking onto the grains, pulses. So if you are coating it with edible oil, the scale like eggs may not be able to stick onto the grains. So that's why we are coating it with edible oil to prevent sticking of eggs onto the grains. So that is why we go for edible oil coating. So that is one accepted practice, accepted management practice for protecting pulses from pulse beetles. So this is the botanical methods. In biological control, though we have several reports of biological control methods which are effective against insect pests, none of them are widely used. Though entomopathogenic fungi such as Beauveria, metarrhizin, Bt, Bacillus thuringiensis are all found to be effective, but in order to make them work, we have to mix those with grains. In India, it's not permitted. We may use with seeds, but for grains, we can't mix it. So there are certain reports that Beauveria is effective against certain insect pests if you mix it with seeds. For grains, we can't mix it, so that kind of works has not much been done. But abroad, there are several reports of these entomopathogenic fungi and all fungi and bacteria, especially Bt and all, used against store grains, store grain pests. But still, it's not that widely accepted practice. Another thing with respect to the by use of biocontrol agents is parasitoids and predators that we discussed earlier. The use of parasitoids and predators, though there are several reports of parasitoids and predators naturally occurring in stored grains, but we can't multiply it, and just like trichogramma and all, we can't multiply it in the lab and release it in the storage environment, because once you release an environment insect in the storage environment, the remnants of the insects, the dead bodies of insects will be present in the grain, and the grains will be unfit for consumption. So we can't use it. So as biocontrol is also having limited potential in stored grain protection, especially with respect to our country, where mixing of anything with the grains is prohibited. Then chemical methods. In chemical methods, we have several methods. We'll discuss with chemical methods in detail later. In India, as we had just discussed, we can't mix anything with the grain. Only seeds can be mixed with insecticides. But we are permitted to go for spraying on bags, on the surface of bags, on walls, floors, etc. That means only surface treatment is permitted. We have now the registered insecticides for surface treatment is malathion and deltamethrin. DDP is banned from January 1 onwards. That means 2021 January 1 onwards, DDP is not available in the market. Bifenthrin is one chemical which we have found effective against stored grain pest, but not registered still against storage pest. One of my students worked with another chemical called the chlorphenapyr. At lab studies indicate that chlorphenapyr is also effective against, so extremely effective against storage pests, better than deltamethrin and all. So malathion and deltamethrin are the two chemicals now used and recommended for surface treatment. We'll discuss about the dose and all later. Fumigants, it's a huge class which is the most widely used management practice for stored grain pests. So fumigants will have an elaborate class, at least one or two classes for fumigants, because that is the one where people carry out a lot of study, and there are several fumigants which we have to discuss. So chemical methods, fumigants and all, I will discuss a bit detail in the subsequent classes. Then coming to the next method, that is engineering method, that is hermetic storage. That means design a structure which is airtight. That is nothing but hermetic storage. Hermetic storage is also called as airtight storage. So design a system which is airtight. That is an engineering method. So that is also called as hermetic storage system. So these are the major things which is respect to integrated pest management in storage. uh, we are finishing off IPM. Certain components of IPM we will be dealing with a bit elaborate in the subsequent classes. The next topic that I will take up is storage of grains. That is one strategy in IPM. How to store your grains, protecting that grain from insect infestation. So there are different methods of storage of grains. We will see the advantages, disadvantages, how a perfect storage system should be. All those things in the upcoming slides. Just a minute, I will share the presentation. What are the storage method? Before going into storage of grains, I will ask you a question. What are the different storage methods you have seen for storing grains, including traditional storage structures, conventional storage structures, along with modern storage structures, any local storage structures? Every locality has its own storage structure. Those from Kerala, has anyone seen any conventional or traditional storage structure? At least their name? No? No one? പത്തായം എന്ന് കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടോ? No? ആരും കേട്ടിട്ടില്ല പത്തായം? Okay, for others, I think every state, every locality has its own traditional storage structure. In Kerala, the most common storage structure we used to call it as patayam. This patayam used to be inside the house. It's used to be inside the house. I still remember my home where I am taking this class. This home is about 50 or 55, about 50 to 60 years old. We had a storage structure on the first floor. where we used to store our paddy. So traditionally, these used to be inside the home. It doesn't used to be outside the home. And mostly in Kerala, because of the availability of wood, almost all the storage structures were made of wood. Made of wood. So whenever persons purchase an old home for renovating it, they will get a huge quantity of wood from this patayam itself, because this patayam used to be prepared out of wood. So like that, every area, in those certain areas where we have plenty of stone, there are stone slabs are used for preparing storage structures. For those areas, those people who are residing near forests where bamboo is in plenty, they used to construct storage structures with bamboo. So depending upon the locally available material, at every locality we have a particular kind of storage structure. I was just discussing about the storage structure which we have in Kerala. But if you ask your parents or grandparents, they will tell you about the storage structures which were conventionally used earlier. But nowadays, everything got dismantled. If you want to find a patayam, it's very difficult. Uh, in my home also, that was dismantled. So it's not, though the place and all, we have not renovated the home, but the patayam was dismantled. So that's the way which was grains were stored earlier. So we'll see the different storage methods which is currently employed in our country, and different types of storage. First, we will see the types of storage. The first one is bulk storage. Bulk storage is nothing but heaping the grains. You might have seen at least in videos or news articles for in Punjab, Haryana, and all. In mandis and all, we will be having huge heaps of grains. That's that is bulk storage. The second one is bag storage. That is the most common one. Everyone might have seen. Usually, the grains are bagged in 50 kg bags, and that bags are the usual ones which we are transporting. So, bulk storage, bag storage. The next one is underground storage. This underground storage is not that widely practiced in our country. I don't know anywhere this underground storage is practiced. Especially in Kerala, we can't go for underground storage because we have about 6 to 8 months. We have plenty of rains, so the seepage of moisture for underground storage will be a very huge problem. So we don't go for underground storage. Maybe certain other areas where moisture, rainfall, extra are not a problem, we can go for underground storage. Godowns, that everyone know. Camp storage, that is another one which is you can see only in our country. We will discuss it about it later, because that is still one of the major storage practice in our country. And the last one is silo. If you go abroad, silos are the one which are the most common storage structure. But in our country, silos are only gaining popularity now. We are not that using silos much yet. We are slowly improving our infrastructure with silos, but not much. We'll see it one by one. What are the different kinds of storage? The first one is, oh, before that, we'll discuss about prerequisites for storage structures. The first and foremost thing is that whatever be the storage structure, as I already discussed, we usually prepare our storage structure using the material which is commonly available to us. The storage structures are usually prepared out of materials commonly available, which are cheap and which are effective in protecting the grains for a longer period. So that is mainly for conventional storage structures. Modern storage structures, they'll employ whatever the materials available. They don't look into easily available materials, cheap materials, and all. For because silos, it is usually constructed with high quality steel, so it's not that cheap and all. So conventional storage structure, it should be with constructed with easily available material, cheap material, and that protect the grains from outside. And wherever we construct our storage structure, it should have proper drainage. That's what we discussed about underground storage structure. In underground storage structure in Kerala, it's not that a feasible option because of the heavy rainfall. So wherever we construct a storage structure, it should have proper drainage, and that structure should be airtight, insect proof, rodent proof, and moisture proof that we have discussed earlier. Whatever be the structure we construct, it should have these properties. It should be airtight, insect proof, moisture proof, and rodent proof. If we have all these four characters, then that storage structure is considered as an excellent structure for grain storage. Airtight, insect proof, rodent proof, and moisture proof. So these are the prerequisites for a storage structure. Coming to the first one, bulk storage. Bulk storage is nothing but keeping the grain in a bulk. We are not bagging it. We are just heaping the grain. So one advantage is that only the periphery will be exposed to insects. The deeper layers of the heap will, or the bulk of the grain will act as an airtight storage because there won't be much movement of air from outside. Usually the insects attack will remain on the peripheral part of the grain. So the exposed area will be less for insect infestation. So that is one advantage of bulk storage. It's not that a scientific storage method because it's not airtight, it's not insect proof, rodent proof, or moisture proof. But if we have very huge quantity of grain, then we can go for bulk storage where the peripheral surface area is low compared to the unit weight of the grain, and the inner layers of the grain lot resembles an airtight airtight storage structure, and the infestation is usually limited to the exposed layers of the grain. So that is bulk storage. It's a just temporary kind of storage. We don't go for a typical bulk storage structure, storage of grains for a longer period. It's for temporary storage. Coming to the next one, that is bag storage. Bag storage is the most common method in our country, wherein we bag the grains into individual units. Maybe for rice, wheat, etc., it is 50 kg. Each bag will be having 50 kg. So if we have, if each bag will be having a particular unit, so that it can be easily counted, easily transacted, easy to load and unload. We can properly stack. Another advantage is that if any bag is damaged, maybe rodent damage or anything, or infested bag is there, you can remove it and treat it. That is one advantage. So bag storage is one which helps in easy loading and unloading. It helps in stacking. It's an individual unit. Each unit is having a specific weight or specific unit, so it helps in as in transaction. And if any bag needs treatment, that bag can be removed and can be disinfested or treated. So bag storage is one method which is widely adopted because of its easiness. For several retail, for market purpose and all, bag storage is the best one. Once you are once you are converting the grains into retail markets, to the wholesalers, to the retailers, it is better to bag it and trade it. That is the easiest way. So bag storage, one of the most common method. The next one is underground storage. Underground storage, it's almost an airtight structure, kind of an airtight bunker, underground bunker. Construct a concrete structure below the ground, store the grains inside it, close it. So what will happen is that the structure will be airtight. Structure, if we don't have such problems such as heavy rainfall in Kerala, it will be moisture proof, rodent proof, airtight, insect proof, etc. And it is also protected from vagaries of the environment such as temperature, etc. So this is one kind of method. I think Western countries and all, they have underground storage structure. We don't have any underground storage structure. Helps, but the construction cost is a bit high. But it is one kind of method which is used for storage of grains. Then comes the next one, cap storage. If we expand it, it is called as cover and plinth storage. Cover and plinth storage. Have you ever studied about cap storage or cover and plinth storage? No, no. What is do you mean by plinth? You might have heard about plinth area of a building, plinth area of a home, etc. No one. Plinth is nothing but the foundation of our building, the base foundation of our building. So it is nothing but we'll build a plinth, and above that we'll keep that grains, and it will be covered with a polythene sheet. That is nothing but cover and plinth storage. I'll show you a photograph, then you can understand it. Yeah. Here you can see a typical cover and plinth storage structure. Here you can see a raised structure. It is somewhere about 0.6 or something. This is the plinth. Usually മലയാളത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ വീടിന് തറ കെട്ടുക എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പ്ലിന്ത് എന്നാണ് അതിനെ പറയുക. So this is the base of the structure. It is a cement and brick structure. We will have a raised structure. This is about 0.6 or something meter height from the ground level, and above that we will keep a wooden pallet. A dunnage will be provided, that you can see that dunnage is kept over that, and above that wooden pallet we will stack the grain. And once you stack the grain, we will cover that stacks with polythene sheets. So we have a cover over the grain, we have a plinth. So this kind of storage is called as cover and plinth storage or cap storage. This is one of the most common storage structure, not a permanent storage structure, temporary storage structure in the major rice and wheat producing tracts of our country such as Punjab and Haryana. Because we have discussed earlier in our classes that our production of rice and wheat are in particular season. In that particular season, we have huge quantum of grain being harvested at a single time. In wheat, maybe from March to April, the entire wheat will be harvested, and we have to store it. So constructing a permanent storage structure is extremely cost intensive. So in order to have a temporary storage structure which is cheap, government has gone for this cover and plinth storage structure. So whatever the grains procured by the FCI or the government will be stored in cover and plinth storage structure, maybe for about 6 months, maximum for 1 year. Usually it is stored for 6 months only. And within this 6 months, these grains will be transported through different parts of the country, go downs at different locations. In Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, etc., where wheat is not a major crop, where wheat requirement is there. So to these states, these stored grains will be transported, and that will be stored in these godowns. So this is nothing but cover and plinth storage. So this is mainly used because of the lack of permanent storage structure, because constructing new storage structures is extremely expensive, and we have surplus production in localized areas just like Punjab and Haryana. We have very huge production in a very small area. And what we construct is that we have construct a rat and damp proof plinth, moisture proof plinth. See this one. This will be just a minute. This is the rat and rodent proof plinth. And we construct sometimes I have not seen, but literature says about it. Have you ever seen this cover and plinth storage during Olympia tour? I had an opportunity to see. The first time I've seen cover and plinth storage is during my Olympia tour. That was in 2000, 20 years back. But when I accompanied one of the batches 2 years back, I couldn't see anyone. No, I think nobody might have seen. So it's very common, especially if you travel after April and all, you can see it. So we'll construct a rat and moisture-proof plinth, and on the sides of the plinth, we construct. That means the border of the plinth here. We can construct brick pillars, and inside that brick pillars, we can insert wooden planks. But nowhere I have not seen this kind of system. When literature says that, and around the plinth we can have brick pillars, and into that brick pillars we can insert wooden planks just like a wall. Nowadays you might have seen constructing certain boundary walls. You might have seen using concrete slabs wherein we have a pillar, and this concrete slabs will be inserted into this pillars. So these kind of structures can be provided, but usually I have not seen anywhere. So brick pillars up to a height of 14 inch will be provided, and into that wooden crates are fixed for stacking of food grains. Then dunnage is provided, that I have shown you. Wooden crates are provided, and above that wooden crates or dunnage, we stack the bags. There is a particular height which is permitted for different kinds of grain that we will discuss in the next slide. And once this dunnage is stacked with the grains, it is covered with polythene sheets. The permitted polythene sheet is 250 micron low density polyethylene sheet. Will cover from the top and all the four sides. And these polythene sheets will be tightly held by nets and nylon wires. This is because it is open, so wind can damage the sheets, polythene sheets. So in order to prevent that, we will keep the grain loads covered with 250 micron polythene sheets, and will tightly held it by nets and nylon lashings. And one thing that we normally do is, I will show you. Yes. See, what will happen is that once you cover this grains with polythene sheets, it is exposed to sunlight. See, this is usually stored in the case of wheat, this is usually stored in April. May and June are extremely hot for this Punjab, Haryana and all. So during those periods, because of this high temperature, whatever the moisture remaining inside the grain, this moisture starts evaporating and reaches the top of this polythene sheets. And in the night, that moisture get condensed. So what will happen is that the top layers of grains will get damaged because of the condensation of moisture happening at the time of storage. In order to prevent that, what we normally do is the top layer we will have bags with paddy husk or any other inert material. Paddy husk is the one which is commonly used. So what it will do is that if we have a single layer of bags containing paddy husk all around the stack on the top layer, whatever moisture which is condensing at the top will be absorbed by this bag containing paddy husk. So the bags containing grains will be protected. So this is one strategy which we normally adopt. We'll keep a layer of bags containing paddy husk, so in order to absorb the moisture coming out of the condensation of moisture from the grains. And usually it is permitted for 6 to 12 months of period. This is storage. We usually dispose it within 6 months. If we store it for more than 6 months, slowly the grain starts deteriorating because it is a pakka temporary storage structure. And why our country is still continuing with this kind of storage? Because this is one of the most economical storage structure and can be erected at very low cost and at a quick time. We can construct it very quickly. It is extremely cheap, so that's why it is widely used. So for FCA it is mainly used for bagged grain. See, it can be fabricated in 3 weeks time, so that's why it's still FCA is going about it. See, in the maximum permissible height for different grains FCA has permitted it, is for wheat, maize and millets it is 20 layers. For rice and milk pulses it is 16 layers. So we will stack it according to the height. Let me see how it is a stack height. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So this can be wheat normally. Maybe 20, 21 or 22. I just roughly counted it. I don't know. It's roughly around 20. So that's the usual stack height of prescribed by FCA for various grains. And whenever we are going for cap storage, there is a chance of deterioration, very huge deterioration. Because if there are heavy rainfall at the time of harvest, so during March, April, the unseasonal rains in Punjab and Haryana, the grains procured will have high moisture content. And these grains will be stored as such. Because of the high moisture content, spoilage will be more. And if it is not, cap storage is not maintained properly, this is what you see. Especially the lower 2 or 3 layers will be completely damaged because they absorb moisture from the bottom of the cap structure. Because if there is rainfall, if this plinth will have water stagnation, and this water stagnation will damage the grain. So this is extremely prone for loss of grains. So that is one major disadvantage is uh, the very huge quantum of. Normally we construct a cap storage structure is 1,500 tons one cap storage, where we can store about 3,000 bags of 50 kgs. That is the normal size FCA prescribes. Where in the side height is 4.5 meter and ridge height is 6 meter, that I will show you here. That means up to this height it is 4.5 meter, and ridge height, the top height is 6 meter. So 4.5 meter side height and ridge height is 6 meter. That's the usually prescribed height by FCA for cap storage. And if we see the disadvantages of it, it is extremely vulnerable to wind damage because we are covering it with sheet. So wind can easily remove the sheet or damage the sheet, and it can cause damage to the grain. So we have to inspect the sheet carefully, and if there is any damage to the sheet, it must be repaired. And we need careful management. One thing we can do is if the weather is extremely sunny, we can remove the sheet, expose the grain for a few hours to the high temperature outside, so that all the moisture which is accumulated in that can be removed. Then again we can close it. So for daytime, during daytime, if there is no threat of rainfall, we can remove the covers for a few hours and then again cover it. That is one strategy that we can adopt for avoiding the damage of grain. And whenever we are going for cap storage, we should ensure that the grains which are stored is having moisture below 14%. Because I told you, if you are storing the grains with higher moisture level, it can lead to very quick deterioration of the grain. And we need to go for regular sampling in order to detect any damage at the early instance itself. So cap storage, though it is cheap and economical, it is very vulnerable for damage. So we have to inspect it regularly. We have to open the sheets and expose it to the sun routinely, and we need to sample it, and we need careful management. Whatever the grains which we store should have a moisture content below 14%. So this is with respect to camp storage. Hope you understood what is cover and plinth storage. Yes or no? No response.
ക്ലിയർ ആണ് സാർ. ചാറ്റ് ബോക്സിൽ റെസ്പോൺസ്.
Oh, chat box. Okay, fine. Any doubts? Any doubts regarding the quiz? No. Okay, we'll meet tomorrow also at 8 o'clock itself. Okay, fine. Thank you.